Want me to just start talking?
Oh, sorry, I'll just give you a quick introduction. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Missing Middle Housing Campaign's webinar for this month. We're really excited to be here with Tihisha Rawlins from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm going to give her a quick introduction, and then she's going to talk to us a bit about AARP Kentucky's efforts. So Tihisha Rawlins is the Associate State Director for AARP Kentucky, where she's responsible for community involvement in state and national affairs. Her particular area of interest and expertise are in Medicare and healthcare reform. She joined the AARP family in 2005 after having worked for Kentucky state government for 7 years. And today we'll hear from Tihisha about her advocacy efforts with AARP, resulting in super exciting ADU policy changes in Louisville. Louisville made several code changes in April of 2021 to make ADU construction more accessible, and they've seen a lot of really exciting results since that time. So I'll pass it over to you, Tihisha, and you should be able to share your screen and take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. I actually forgot exactly what that intro said, but I'm glad that it said that my expertise was in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and things of that nature, because I was not a housing expert and I had a really big learning curve. And I actually, think it was to my advantage, because when we're talking about ADUs, a lot of people are like, what are you saying, ADU? And then you say an accessory dwelling unit. And they're like, well, what does that mean? So when I was going out to talk about ADUs and as we were developing our campaign, I just kept in mind, not everybody's going to know what an ADU is. And so we need to just really start with the basics and help people to understand what we're even talking about. So the problem, most of our local ordinances had not been updated since the 60s. And in fact, we found an article in the Courier Journal, which is the largest paper in the state, but definitely in Louisville, from 1946, where the council had been trying to update the zoning and failed. It still did not work. So Louisville is facing, and we still are facing, a 31,000 unit shortage for our lowest income people. And actually, if you not just those lowest income, if you add all the low income, we're hitting about 50,000 units short of affordable housing. So we definitely have an issue. So when we started working on the campaign, we worked with the Metropolitan Housing Coalition, the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and Age Friendly Louisville, which is not even on there. But what's interesting is that once we testified the very first time, we heard other organizations who were testifying as well. And we grew our partner list to include the Kentucky Equal Justice Center and the Homeless Coalition. And we actually had people or organizations that represented people who are mentally disabled, and they would put them in the community, and they felt like an ADU would be a great place for people with these conditions. So our group, it may have started small, but it definitely grew. And I think that was a really good thing, because when we did our op-eds, which I'll talk about in a little bit, it started off with the three or four organizations, but then we were able to put all of the organization names on there, and that really helped. I did want to talk about the opposition just for a second, because I thought their name was pretty clever. They called themselves the Citizen Coalition for LDC Reform. So it made it sound like these were a group of people living in neighborhoods who all came together to work on reform, and that's not who they were. They were actually a group of people from outside of the state who had a really narrow vision of what the land development code reform should look like. And so it was very interesting. They tried to paint AARP as an outside DC organization coming in and trying to, rule things. And so it was really, really, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, it was really fun for me to show that, we're not from the outside. We all live here. There's volunteers and members all across the city. And so, it was a fun campaign for me. So we did have, basically 3 goals. We wanted to remove the conditional use permit, which the CUP, you had to have that no matter where you were, you had to have that to build the ADU. So we want to just get rid of that. We wanted to create by right the ability to build your ADU, and we wanted to be able to build it by right with special standards. So there were some standards that were involved that related to size and location and access, and I'll talk about all that at the end, because there were some things in there that we, at the end of the day, we really didn't advocate for, and we really didn't want it, but to get it through, we agreed, because I have worked in advocacy for a long time, not on this, but you know, sometimes we just wait out for the perfect, and waiting for the perfect is not always the best idea. Sometimes you just have to work incrementally. So what I know you all may not be able to see everything that's on this list, but I just want to show, this is page 1 of 2, all of the things that we did to try to get this ordinance passed. You know, we had 4 public forums, and of course this was during COVID, so we had a bunch of them virtually, but then the city had a lot of them in person because the city was definitely on board with this. We created those easy to understand talking points because we wanted people to understand what we were really talking about. You know, there was a lot of confusion about, oh, they're talking about Airbnb, or they're talking about tiny homes. And we're not, that's not what an ADU is. And so we really needed to get just easy, understandable talking points for people. We got pastors on our side. We had letters to the editor. That was very important. We used AARP volunteers, age-friendly Louisville volunteers. We had people from the community who would write these letters to the editors and try to get those published. And we were successful in getting some of those printed. And then we had ads in the paper to inform people about our public forums, and it was a whole campaign. On the next page, it just goes on to show you a few more things. So we were able to have people from the community, not staff, because, you know, I'm paid. They were like, oh, she's paid to say that. So we were able to have people from the community come in and testify at every single meeting they had. So we had people talking at the planning committee meetings. We had people talking at the planning commission meetings. And then we had people talking at the full council meeting. Everywhere they were, we had someone there. We sent emails, we had volunteers send emails. We just had a whole lot going on. And I'm not sure how closely you guys are working with AARP, but AARP does have some resources that you all could use. So towards the bottom of this particular slide, there's something called Hub Dialer. They can call members in the community who support affordable housing and ask them to make calls to their council members. There's an email system that we can use where we can identify people who say that they care about affordable housing and have them email their council members. So there's all kind of things that that you can use. This next slide, I'm sorry everything is underlined, but it's underlined because it's hyperlinked. And you can actually click on any of these things and go and see what these resources are. But the one that I used the most was the one that has the 3 stars next to it, and it's called the ABCs of ADUs. And it's a really easy to understand booklet that's free. And I sent every council member that particular book, also sent it to them online in PDF form. And one thing that I found, you know, funny about this was during the council vote, one of the members, you know, made fun of it. He said, you know, who sends anything snail mail anymore? However, he had it in his hand and he was holding it up as he was making that statement. So I was like, it's a win for us. And, you know, he looked at it. He had it in his hand, so it worked. And again, those are free. You can get those, have them for you all, send them to your council people. But the very bottom link on this page is a page that has all of these resources and more on there, and they're all free. You all can use those things. So what actually did we get done? We were able to pass the ordinance to get ADUs permitted by right throughout the city. unless there was a homeowners association that says you can't. So if there's already a homeowners association that said you cannot do that, it is not by right. That did not make it in. So what we did pass was 1 ADU per single family dwelling lot. So you couldn't have 2, you couldn't do all this extra stuff. It could be attached or detached. That was not a problem. We did have a maximum size, 800 square feet or 30% of the gross floor area ratio. So it was whichever was greater. And we're having an issue with some people who are not understanding that. We actually had to put in, because of the concern that we heard from the community, that an ADU shall not be used as a short-term rental without a conditional use permit. So if they were trying to build the ADU just so they could make this Airbnb short-term rental type thing, that's not what this is for. So we're not saying they can't do it, but they have to use a different process, a different permit to do that. And then this was also brought up from community, our listening forums. What they said was, we are afraid if someone has an ADU and they're already not taking care of their property, that they may become a slumlord or they may let the property run down. So we put in there any property that has been subject to a zoning, property maintenance, or building code violation in the 12 months prior, that they have to go to more review. They have to be reviewed and approved by planning and design. And that was something that came from listening to community members. So it worked. So we were able to actually get this signed by the mayor in June. And from August through December, we had 23 ADU applications. And one of the reasons I wanted to put this slide up, though, is because you can see that some of them have been denied. So the fear was, oh, well, they'll just let anything go and anything can be approved. No, if they don't fit, then they're being denied, or they have to go through the conditional use process. They're not just approved by right. So, we had some that were determined not to be an ADU. Some didn't meet the height and size requirement. One was in an area that had not adopted these regulations. So I thought that was really good that, we're not just approving any and everything out there. So what's next is defense, defense, defense. And I say that because we have already had this year one council member try to add a notification. He wanted to say that if you are applying for an ADU, that you should have to notify all your neighbors at the same time. But we fought really hard to not have that in there. And so we were able to fight again. We were like, we're going to treat an ADU as you would any other property. You wouldn't have to notify your neighbors if you were renovating something in your house. Let's treat it all the same. And we were able to vote that down. So that was good. We're going to be working on multiplex dwelling units, duplexes, courtyard and pocket neighborhoods, because right now a very large part of Louisville is still single family zoned. So we're working on that. So we'll be working on deed restrictions and covenants and inclusionary zoning. So those are some things that we're working on next. So thank you for letting me share about ADU advocacy in Louisville, and I'm going to stop sharing and see if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And yeah, I learned a lot and have a lot of questions. I think my first question is that it seems like you all did most of this during the pandemic. Like a lot of this advocacy and outreach was during COVID. So how did that, I guess, what was the impetus for feeling like this is a good time and we should really make this a concerted effort? And how did you have to pivot as a result of the pandemic?
So you're right. We actually didn't start a lot of that on the ground stuff until October 2020, which was definitely during the pandemic. And it all started because of Breonna Taylor. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but Breonna Taylor was a young woman who was killed in her home at night because of a no-knock warrant. And there was a huge outcry in Louisville. And so the Metro Council decided that they would just do an equity review on everything in the city. So one of the things that had the equity review was the land development code. From that, they funded let's see, Opticos. They funded Opticos to come in and do a review of our land development code. And they discovered like 6 pages worth of things that needed to be done. And so 6 pages was way too much to handle at one time. So we decided to do just the first 6. And of those 6, one of those dealt with ADUs. And because the city was behind the funding and the research and all of that, they were on board. We didn't have to fight the city on any of this stuff, but they felt like ADU would be the hardest thing to get through of the 6, and that's where we came in. So that's how it got started. And we did start in October 2020, and they were trying to do a few of them in person. AARP had this really strict no in-person thing. So when they were trying to do their in-person on the ground work, we worked with partners to do like Zoom webinars and smaller things like that online. And it worked. It was really good. We had a lot of participation from a lot of different groups. We sent emails, and we did, and all the partners did, and the city has a email list. So we just really worked that way.
Awesome. That's so interesting. Yeah, and really great how you all used all those big events happening to help, springboard these changes. So in Omaha, we're interested in advocating for ADUs more with our city. And I'm interested in knowing a little bit more of the nitty gritty, if you recall, about kind of how the dominoes fell. So did this go in front of city council first and get passed as a change that could be made to the zoning code? Did you take it to the planning board? What were kind of the big steps in terms of actually changing the code legally that you all worked through?
Yes, so the first thing was planning committee. And then once we got out of committee, and I think, I was trying to remember how many people were on the committee. I can't remember. But after the planning committee went to the planning commission, and there's 7 of them. And then from the planning commission, we had to go to full council. And we actually passed the final 23-3. So it was great.
Yeah, that's a lot of alignment and agreement. That's awesome. I heard you mention concerns from residents about, rental units and Airbnbs, and then also this idea of, upkeep of property and zoning enforcement, or code enforcement, I guess, making sure everything is, safe and healthy. What other concerns do you recall hearing a lot about from residents, and what were kind of your key responses?
Yeah, so we had concerns that there's not going to be enough parking, which that reminds me, one of my slides was missing because we did have to address that. So we had concerns about parking. There was concern about wastewater and water runoff from, just too much rain, and trying to remember some of the other concerns. But one thing that we really use to try to get people to be on one page is that just because you are permitted to move forward with your by right ADU, it doesn't mean you don't have to go through all of the other permits that are required to build the house or whatever you're building. So that was one of our main pushbacks. Now we did put some provisions in there about the parking, but some of the concerns really, we were able to say, that's not really a concern because that is going to be addressed from plumbing or this or that. There's other agencies within Metro who are responsible for that piece of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you recall ever changing someone's mind about this topic, that like maybe they came to the organization thinking they were, staunchly opposed to ADUs, and then during a conversation, do any of those moments stand out? I'm always just curious if that's actually possible to make that happen.
No, I know that there were a few, because we didn't have all the votes at first. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, we just went in and boom, we were so good. We passed it without any conversations. There were a lot of off the record, not in council or not in commission meetings. We sent, like I said, I sent letters in plain English because I wanted people to understand what this is. One thing that, we didn't really want to call it was a granny flat. We're trying to get away from that term. So we called it, a cottage or a backyard cottage or a mother-in-law suite. People understand that. And then one thing to make it personal, I would always say, I have a college kid. I really hope he gets a job and goes on when he graduates from college. But if not, it'd be nice to have a little apartment right there on our property where he can live and have his space and I have mine. And then we'd have a volunteer come in and say, well, I have my mother, she's going to come stay with us. So we really try to make it personal, but also just plain language, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's so important because zoning codes are really confusing for people. They're super hard to understand and complicated. And I think, that point about plain English really resonates with me. We have a couple of questions in the chat. Alex asked, how can city planning staff be most helpful in advocating for ADUs? So maybe was there someone in city planning that was an ally to you all? What did that look like?
Most definitely. They were already on board and sold. So that really helped us. In fact, they came to us because they were like, I think we're going to have a hard time with this. We need help. So yes, if you have them as an ally, I think that's great. And if they're not really aware of what ADUs are and how they can help with the affordable housing issues, definitely educate them. I went into it with counsel saying nobody knows anything about it, not talking down to them, but just, hey, this is what we're talking about because we want to make sure that we can offer affordable housing all over and, just really make it sound, understandable. And wow, this is great. This is a great idea to help us with our issues.
Brian put in the chat, can we borrow your city council for a couple of weeks? we could really
no.
Leland asked, what are the pros and cons of not notifying neighbors? Building permits are still needed. Those are public knowledge.
Right. So it's all, none of it's secret. Like that list I just showed you of all the ADUs that has already been applied and the 3 that have not, approved and the 3 that have been denied. It's all out there. It's none of that's private. But the point of that they were making was you should notify your neighbors, and they wanted to get the approval of the neighbor on your left, your right, and in front and in back of your property. And so some of the arguments were, what if I don't know my neighbors? What if we've had a long-standing feud? We got the Hatfields and McCoys here. There was just all kind of issues with them wanting to notify the neighbor. They just, that was in the grand scheme of our conversations, just seemed like it was a bit too much, like it was just over the top. The other thing was people felt like it would be NIMBY. I don't want that over here. So, everybody still has the opportunity to know what's going on. I just don't have to notify them first that I'm doing something or at all.
Yeah.
Hi, if I could, this is Leon Jacobson. If I could build on that for just a second, is that, so for instance, I've got a housing association that I belong to, and they even control the color of the paint on the house. They control the roofing. And for instance, like an ADA would have to go, I'm going to assume, have to go to the housing association for approval. And those are public meetings as well. So not only is there a planning commission approval, but in some cases, at least in Nebraska, there's also a homeowners association controlled through covenants for the first 15 or 20 years of the neighborhood's existence.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure if you were on when I mentioned, if there's already a homeowners association that prohibits this resolution does not override that. And in fact, we actually wrote that into the resolution because that was the only way to get a couple of the council members to vote for it. That if there's already a homeowners association that prohibits ADUs, that they can't just do it by right. They would have to go through your homeowners association first to get that approved, and then the conditional use permit and all that rest of that. So yes, we definitely have some homeowners association issues here. And one of the things that we're going to work on in our phase 3, because the opticals report that they did for us, we broke it into 3 phases. Then that last phase is to deal with some of those covenants and homeowners associations and things like that.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's something that we would also, encounter here in Omaha. And I also just wanted to mention that I thought that Louisville's accessory dwelling unit page on the website was so easy to understand and accessible. And I love that they have that document that says, what ADUs have, been given permits, which ones didn't pass the perm rating. Like it's so easy and accessible to track. Did you all work with them to create that formatting? I'm going to share it in the chat in case anyone wants to take a peek.
Okay. No, we did not. But what we negotiated. I mean, so again, this is all negotiations. What we negotiated with council was we would be transparent. We would let them know how many ADUs were being applied for and how many were being approved and were not. And so this was a way to meet that negotiation point. So we could do it any way we wanted, which I'm just glad they did it real transparent that way. But yeah.
That's awesome.
So the one sucky thing that's in there that we did not want, and I mean, we fought and we just couldn't get it in, was that one of the units has to be owner occupied. So our goal and plan is to leave that alone for 2 or 3 years and then go back and see if we can get the owner occupied part removed. So.
Oh, interesting. And was that, city council negotiations where that came into play, or from the start, was that kind of a sticking point?
I think the opposition might have floated it out there, and then one of the city council members was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And again, it's because they're afraid that it's going to become a slumlord property that's going to be run down and nobody's going to take care of it. If the thought is, if the owner lives there, of course they'll keep it up. If they're gone and nowhere to be found, then they may not. So we were like, okay, fine, we can go with that. And that probably was the last thing that got us over the hump. We had to put that in there.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, we actually have a volunteer that wanted to build an ADU, but that was the thing keeping him from doing it, is that I think he was renting the primary unit to his brother, and his mom was going to live in the ADU, and it wouldn't have been allowed. So so Brian asked, did the Citizens Coalition for LDC speak in opposition at any planning city council meetings? Did you have conversations?
They spoke in opposition at every meeting, yes.
And did you have any conversations with that group, or did they just kind of seek to cause opposition?
Yes, we did. So we went to their meeting to hear their concerns, because we didn't want, we really wanted them to understand what this was all about. And honestly, at the end of the day, I just think they had different issues. They wanted to really focus. So as I mentioned earlier, this was born out of an equity lens because of the Breonna Taylor case. And they just felt like this was not addressing equity. And they were like, if we're going to do this, we need to do it this way. And this is not addressing equity. How is this doing that? And we're like, increments, steps, you're fighting the wrong battle. This is not a bad thing. So they testified and they spoke out against us at every single meeting. So. And they sent letters, and we did op-eds. They did op-eds. So yeah, it was a thing. It was a battle. Yeah.
Do you think that they will continue to be opposition as you look to, some of your newer initiatives like duplexes and triplexes and different types of middle
I'm
housing?
not sure. So of the 6, one of those issues was urban gardening. And one of the leaders of the opposition was really into urban gardening. So she got what she wanted. So I think she's gone. And then the other one, the other main leaders, I don't know where she is. I don't think she's still in Louisville. She was not a Louisvillian. So I mean, I don't know. There may be some people who like, I don't want to duplex in my neighborhood. I don't know. But I don't think the 2 main leaders, I think they're gone. I think they're good.
Oh, that's so fascinating that they didn't even live in the city. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Did Kentucky have state restrictions that limited ADUs?
No, not that I know of. Not that impacted us in Louisville.
Yeah, that's excellent. Some other good tidbits in the chat. So I wanted to kind of wrap up just by asking, you listed a lot of really awesome initiatives. What's kind of like closest in your line of sight right now with AARP and your kind of housing efforts? What's the most pressing issue you all are working on right now in terms of housing?
Well, my goal for 2022 was to start working on the duplexes and the quadplexes and all that. But so far, I've been playing a lot of defense. So we played defense, trying to make sure we didn't add that notification issue onto the ADUs. We won. And then that same council member came back. We have something called MRDIs, like mixed residential something incentives. And what it is an incentive for builders to add affordable units to whatever they're building. So if they're building an apartment complex, maybe 80 apartments are market rate and 20 are affordable, So that went into law in 2015. It had not been used until January. And so as soon as it was put to use, this councilman says, oh, wait, we need to review it. And so we're like, you've had 7 years to review it. Why are we reviewing it now? And you're reviewing it because somebody's actually using it. And then he had a companion piece to put a moratorium on it. So, we just got finished fighting that, and it was voted down, but that was voted down on party lines. Like, it's not as much of a victory, but, so we're just playing a lot of defense, but we do really want to move forward on our on our duplex and not have, allow some of these things in single family zoning. So that's what we're working on next.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even think that after you passed it, of course you playing defense on, trying to change other codes. So Alex asked, has any of the federal work on ADUs and land use been helpful at the local level in Louisville?
I don't know that we actually refer to anything federal. I do know that this administration has had some housing workshops, like once a month, virtual, and they've had Louisville on to talk about what we did. But I don't know that we used anything from the federal to say, hey, look at what they're doing at the federal level. We should probably do that here.
Yeah. That's a good question. And then, I did want to ask you, I saw online that I think AARP got some funding to do some education and outreach with folks once the code has been changed. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and what was most successful in, educating and out, reaching out to folks in the community?
So we've got two sources of funding. So I'm not sure which one you're talking about, so I'll just tell you about both of them. So the first one is every year AARP has something called the Community Challenge Grant. And those are mini grants to help you with the project that you have been thinking about, or you're already started and you just need a little more funding to get you over the line. So one of the council members had the forethought to say, you know what, we're going to pass this. So what we want to do is create a brochure, a webpage, or whatever it takes to educate people that they can now do this. So she wrote a grant for $10,000 and she got that. Well, while maybe we had already passed it, but the mayor hadn't signed it yet. Age Friendly Louisville, Metro Housing Coalition, and the Louisville Housing Trust Fund all got together to write a grant to Humana for, I think it was $100 and maybe $15,000, and it was funded at $75,000 for our next phase, for phase 2. So we use that money to hire a PR company and just different strategies that we're using to help us get started. Of course, we've been playing defense, but we have this funding so that we can try to move the needle on affordable housing next. So
that's so impressive. Well, congratulations. That's really exciting. Any other questions for Tihisha? Okay, thank you so much. I think this is, we're just kind of starting our advocacy efforts here and kind of directly reaching out to City Council and planning board. And it's really exciting and inspiring to hear about a city kind of similar in size to us that was successful in doing that. And I know, how essential AARP is and all of that content and information they provided. And we definitely rely and, leverage them as a resource as well. But thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure, if we have questions or maybe can rely on some of your resources, we'll follow up.
All right, you're welcome and good luck. You guys can do it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And everyone on the call, keep an eye out for an email coming next week asking you all to reach out to your city council representative in order to legalize ADUs. We're going to do a more concerted campaigning effort starting next week. It'll probably come in a couple of phases, but we're going to send a letter from neighborhood associations who are on board with changing the zoning code to allow for ADUs by right in Omaha, and would love for you all to reach out to your representative. So more to come on that. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great evening.